Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of GoHire Talks. Today we've got Robin Griffin who's going to talk about some incredible topics about moving from compliance in HR to being a strategic advisor in the business. Robin, go ahead and give me an intro about yourself and how you got into this space.
Thank you so much, John, for having me on. I really appreciate that. So, my history and background, I bring 30 years of HR experience. And we're not just talking about policy here, but we're talking about human behavior, conflict resolution, leadership coaching. I have my degree in HR and I've got more letters behind my name. And it isn't because I think I'm super smart. It shows competency in those fields. Those that I have is SPHR, PHR, SCP, CP, as well as WZ. So Wicklander offers interview techniques. This is how you learn to do a forensic interview. I say all of those things simply because it means I know what I'm talking about. I have the
Mhm.
credentials behind those things. But at the crux of what I do, I believe strong HR teams blend compliance with compassion, with courage. I want to be able to go to work and know that these organizations or these leaders, they're walking out more healthy and have a more stable unit than they did going in. I just want to build those leaders, create those workplaces for people where they don't have to come to work and go home at the end of the day. Oh my gosh, I can't believe what happened at work today. They want to go home and say, I made a difference.
Yeah, that's interesting. I became a part-time ski instructor with a very large organization with several thousand employees. And I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. I'd heard Workday is really hard to go through. I did 20 hours of training. I was astonished at the level of detail and the professionalism that this company put in to the training. Because as a ski instructor, you are the second largest revenue stream for the business besides tickets. It's amazing to see that. And I interact with the Workday team all the time as an employee. I have to understand the system. It is such a strange thing that as an employee, it's the people who help you get your job done and your training is lumped under the if you get an email from somebody in HR, you're probably in trouble. I think there's got to be a shift. There's HR compliance and then there's people operations or however that shift is. So give me a little, I know we talked about it in the green room. What's been your history with that? And I know it's something that you've been working on for years.
Thank you. And you're right, John, because when we talk about being what I would call the policy police or the agent in charge of no fun, people know we're talking about HR
Yeah.
and compliance and policies. They are very important. Okay. But if full transparency, the Robin in front of you guys today, that's not the Robin that was doing HR 30 years ago. 30
Hmm.
years ago, Robin came in with her handbook and it was black and white, right? It was, I am here. You stepped outside of the line. We're going to write you out. And some of this comes with emotional intelligence and maturity. As you go through, you shift from the compliance piece to say, how can I actually help this manager? What is the root cause? What's the deeper issue? Sometimes, yes, we have to be the policy police. But more times than not, we go back to, like you mentioned, training. Was this person trained properly? Are they being communicated to in a way that they receive the information? I drive my team crazy because I do that feedback loop, but they get it because oftentimes message sent is not message received.
Yeah.
Go from being policy police to a transactional or from transactional to transformational, huge differences from leadership accountability, engagement, profitability. My role is to help them solve the problems, not just say, oh, that's against policy.
Where in your life, in your career, did you start seeing that change? You had mentioned it a couple times. What position were you in the companies that you changed and now you had this opening to start being more than just transactional?
I think that's a good call out because there are roles where we are more transactional at times. Most all of us start out early on, either as a HR generalist or we start out in the recruiting field where we're churning and burning. And we're not thinking about more of the long term things. We are thinking about retention and time to fill. For me, it was probably in my mid 30s when I finally made the shift working at an organization where I felt valued, I felt important. I felt that they trusted me, that I was not just looked at, oh, that's just HR, where people would come and ask for sound counsel. And that began to foster the relationships. As you start to build those, and people say, oh, HR is not trying to run my department, they're trying to help me run more efficiently. It comes back to building that credibility. At least for me, I had to build the credibility. I've always worked in male dominant workforces, and I'm a tough cookie, but building that trust through credibility, through being consistent and having the courage to speak up and speak that truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's what a manager doesn't want to hear. A lot of times, HR people are non confrontational. And I'll give an example. I was working at a big company and I had a senior director come to me. They were mad and wanted to write an employee up because the employee raised their voice. Okay, walk me through the situation. What was going on? I was over there yelling at him, doing this. I'm like, okay, hold on. Let's think through this real quick. Okay. Let's talk about equity. Let's talk about fairness. Let's talk about respect for the individual. And as I talked through this, he didn't recognize, oh, I want to write him up for something I was just doing to him. He was still in that mindset. I'm the boss. You do what I say. And we do need to obey our bosses, right?
Yeah.
But it's how we treat people. How are we influencing them? When we can get leaders to begin to think a little bit differently, we don't want people just to follow the rules. We want them to build a great organization. We still want rules and compliance in place, but don't do it just for the sake because that's the rule. We want to do it because it's the right thing. And
Yeah.
for me, making that shift to true partner, it took a hot minute.
How about being a strategic advisor? It's a non-linear path, right? You enter HR as a recruiter or a generalist. Once you get your trust and respect and you understand the baselines, then you have these conversations and you realize, wow, this is not just the stuff I read and it's not an assurance book, right? Or a test. This is now management. Then you go from a manager to strategy. And how did that start happening in a different, did you have to leave the company to do it? Or what was the basis of now becoming a strategic advisor rather than just a manager who understood and could help on personal issues?
No, thank you, John. I think you take bits and pieces from everywhere you go. Like every role you have, you take a little bit of this, a little bit of that. The shift to a true partnership happened in the midst. I was paid very nicely to go to a company with the bells and whistles, and I had this halo glow. And I was there about 2 months. And then I was tasked with reducing the workforce by about 67%. That's where the true partnership really started to emerge. Not only did I realize at that time, hey, I've probably been suckered in because they knew my strengths. But for me, it was partnering with them, doing this the right way, making sure for these team members that were going to be impacted, that we've got resources available for them, whether that's resume review, getting outsourced placement. I was able to see a bigger picture. When that role ended, I knew going forward, this is not going to happen again, where I feel that, oh my gosh, I'm the passerby. So I think for that, it was learning, hey, I need to be on top of things like headcount, overtime. Do we have succession plans in place? What is the overall strategy so that I can guide these conversations and influence all of these managers that I work with to be able to understand, hey, before we go cut heads, let's do absolutely everything in our power that we possibly can.
Let me ask you this. In today's world, there's a lot of talk about AI in the workforce and automation. From your perspective, what's working and not working across your customers and your experience and your friends? What have you heard from other CHROs and HR leaders? There's a statement out there that AI is going to, a bunch of different AI statements, but there's AI statements out there saying, hey, we're going to see a reduction in workforce. Hey, we're spending all this money on AI to increase personal productivity. And yet no one's actually getting trained effectively. It's a conflict because of the way I've seen it rolled out and having been a technology person for years is that artificial intelligence is not like dropping in Workday. So it's not like you drop it in and you get the business rules. When a CIO and the CEO sign the check and say, now we're dropping in Copilot, they can't come to the next quarterly meeting and say, oh, we just put in Copilot. Now we're AI driven. That's not what it was supposed to do. The goal is to create productivity, But in order to do productivity, you have to do workforce planning. You've got to do a whole bunch of other things that very few people are even talking about or doing at this point. What's your kind of thoughts in this area and what you've seen or heard and talked to other friends and colleagues about?
Thank you, John. I will say the HR world itself is pretty safe because for a lot of these things, AI can't give you best counsel on different scenarios. However, people in general, I'm going to say, and I have a lot of people in the tech world, a lot of blue collar, white collar people out there, a lot of people are nervous that AI is going to take over. We're all going to not have jobs. And that's not the case, right? When we talk about Copilot or ChatGPT, those are meant to be tools and resources to help us be more efficient, more productive. So it's not about replacing people, right? It's about protecting the future of the organization. And as we're adapting to new technologies, there's still a handful of people who are so resistant. But that isn't what I want to focus on. What I want to focus on is I want all of these people who maybe get nervous, and myself included. At times, I'm a little leery till I get used to it, but I want them working on being the best versions of themselves. How can I prepare myself for these changes that AI is bringing? So we're flipping that script, this negative, half empty versus half full. How can I best prepare myself for the future? And
Yeah.
that takes, hey, these things, I will tell you, Copilot and ChatGPT, they can formulate things. If I give them the input, much more eloquently than Robin ever could. I am a Texas gal. I am not the most refined. I can put a few things together, just enough to be dangerous. People do get nervous. And when people get nervous, sometimes they slow down productivity. And what happens on the HR end is, hey, you're the lowest man on the totem pole for production. I'm going to look at the metrics. The metrics are going to drive to me what's going on.
Yeah, it's been interesting because it is a big dilemma in the space right now. Everyone's trying to figure out a path forward. And I think my personal opinion is that the way ChatGPT rolled out in the United States is as, hey, it's going to take everyone's jobs. It's a different perspective in Europe. In Europe, it's been, how can we use this? Let's teach the kids. In the school systems in the United States, it was, don't use ChatGPT because you're a cheater. So we created this, we have a different cultural mindset about AI than some countries where they're teaching elementary school kids how to use it to get to answers. And we're like, no, if you use it, we're going to check everything to make sure that you didn't, and you're going to get kicked out of school and all this other stuff. I hear this stuff all the time still. The educational system has to get up to speed with what this is actually doing. I have friends that have kids going to USC and 4 years at $250,000, or actually 500,000. What are they going to come out and do if they haven't been trained on how to leverage these tools? What have you seen in different companies, variations of how companies have implemented these types of tools?
Yes, I have, John. And we still have a lot of people super resistant, even in the
Hmm.
telecom world, to
Yeah.
adapting to true technology.
It-
We still have organizations with paper files.
oh
We
yeah.
have all kinds of things, and people, I've heard things that the government's spying on me.
True.
At the end of the day, I'm like, I need to be able to access information in a timely manner.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of those things came back through when COVID hit. People realized the need for having more trust in systems. For AI, the biggest thing is it's not going to go away. Technology is only going to keep evolving.
Yeah.
When we look at Moore's law, this technology is going to keep getting faster, smaller, more reliable. Resisting it, we're not helping ourselves, but learn to use it. If I wanted to write a policy, I can write the policy probably with my eyes shut. However, if I can plug those things in and I know the laws behind them, I can whip that out in a fraction of the time that it would normally take me, which is going to help reduce labor hours, adding on to the EBITDA.
Yeah.
And that's where people don't understand when we have more time freed up for things. That's where we can increase bonuses and pay raises, those type of benefits that sometimes our regular team doesn't see.
Yeah. I think you got me at EBITDA. When you hear someone at HR talk EBITDA, you're on a different spectrum. You're back into the 30% to understand the language of a CEO and CFO, which is critical. On that point, when did you understand finances and the language of a CEO, CIO, and CFO. One of my other guests, who actually is the CIO and CHRO, he's like, if you don't speak in anyone in HR, if you don't speak the language of business, you don't have a seat at the table and you never will.
John, full transparency, I grew up poor. So I understood the value of a dollar.
Yeah.
And I worked multiple jobs when I was younger. I'm always looking for opportunities, right? However, making the shift for me, I don't know that I had a big shift in how I look at organizations' money versus mine. By nature, I'm very frugal. Most HR people are. I would never spend the company's money in any way that I would not spend mine. So when I have leaders who are maybe having high turnover, maybe having high overtime, whatever that is, that's where I'm digging in. I'm putting on my financial hat and saying, hey, let's take a look at profitability overall here. Okay. What are we looking at? And those shifts for me, it just come very natural. That is a natural part of who I am. I'm naturally fiscally conservative, and that rolls over to every aspect of my life, which balances. My husband is in sales. So,
Yeah.
yin and yang, right?
Yeah. But was there a time early in your HR space where, because you understood finance and economics, you could actually talk to, even in your earliest roles, did you notice that you were able to advance faster because you could talk the language of business?
I believe so. Yes. Yes. So, my first professional role, I was very blessed. The CEO of the organization was so down to earth. The best advice he ever gave me was anybody who mistreats our receptionists, welcome out the door. And at the time, I was like, what? But I could go to him for sound counsel and he would say, hey, have you checked the stocks on this? 20 something years old,
Hmm.
23. I didn't care about stocks, but I started learning about wisdom from him because he was giving me little tidbits of things that interested him, and I would give him little tidbits that interested me. And so I think it was planted for me very early by a leader that I very well respected and still do.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. I know we're out of time. So tell the audience how they can find you, and on your daily basis, what kind of roles are you doing these days? And I know you're working with a company, but I think you also consult on the side.
Yeah. So, hey, anybody that wants to reach me, hop on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. Reach out to me. I can give you further contact information. I do offer webinars that I'm happy to send to people to help with any type of compliance. At the end of the day, what I really want people to do is to go from saying, hey, I want the leaders to stop asking, hey, is this allowed? And say, hey, what's the right thing to do? And how can we get there?
Oh, that is probably the clip of the century right there. All right, Robin, thank you so much. I hope everyone will have a great time listening to Robin's insights and learn from her experiences. Thanks again.
Thanks for spending your time here with GoHire Talks and listening to our guests. My intention has always been to create incredible content to help you in your career in recruiting, marketing, business, and leadership. We appreciate all of the insights and feedback you provide. If you've got guests you'd like us to have on the show, please let us know. Again, thank you for all your support.